Does everybody have a seat? Because we have a whole row that's empty here, but maybe they're afraid of the murder mystery. Okay, good evening. It's so great to see so many people here. I'd like to thank you all for coming to the second talk of our spring speaker series. We have Brock Joby from Winterthur coming in May to talk about the Manchester furniture industry, so I hope you'll all come to that. And we'll have a summer event at Shark's Mouth. Please check out our website for details and join the museum if you haven't already. I want to particularly thank our program committee for organizing the event and Nancy Cleabard of the parish church for allowing us to use this great space. Today we had, I think, over 90 people enrolled for this talk, so it's really great. Today we're delighted to have Rob Fitzgibbon, who you might remember from talking about his book on grave robbing last fall. And it's kind of a theme here. And Wayne Soini, who are both authors of a new book about the Rockport murder mystery called Murder in Rockport, Massachusetts. And if you're interested, you can purchase a copy of the book from Hannah Harlow, who runs the Beverly Farms bookstore. You can either buy it now or at the end of the talk and have it signed by the authors. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Wayne and Rob to speak. I just want to say the restrooms are here, and please hand in your name tag at the end of the program. Thank you all for coming.
I guess seniority counts for something. I get a chance to speak first. Rob did the heavy lifting on this book, I always say. I just corrected the Finnish names. And it's hard. Oker. You gotta get all these things. And he did the rest, he did the balance and the footnotes. But I'd like to begin, if I may, with a moment of silence, because authentically this involves two unsolved murders, two actual victims of crime, about whom we wrote with such fidelity to the truth as we could. And I just invite, we'll do a moment of silence at first for the two victims. Thank you. And Rob, I guess if you would, want to start going?
Okay, we're off. So first I'm going to start off with a quick reading of the dedication, and then I'm going to read chapter 17 of this, which is called The Midnight Mass. This work is dedicated with sympathy and gratitude to the surviving families of Arthur Oker and Augusta Johnson. They have not ceased to feel the pain of unhealed grief. They honor their ancestors' larger life stories, and their quest for closure motivated them, to help the authors, strangers to them, to write what could be written. So let me get into the Midnight Mass. This is Wednesday, November 1st to Thursday, November 2nd, 1933, from 11 p.m. until 2 a.m. In the late evening, the DA went to the Johansen house and asked the Reverend for a list of all the members of the Swedish Congregational Church. The Reverend supplied the list. At 11 p.m., State Troopers Farron and Byrne went door to door in the Pigeon Cove and Pigeon Hill neighborhoods, rousting the members out of bed and ordering them to assemble at the church. The night was cold and clear. Compliant parishioners put on their coats and hats, walked or drove to church, and sat silently in the pews. All the members were gathered by 1 a.m. Reverend Johansen was sitting not up front, but with his flock. Gathered in the back were journalists from multiple newspapers. At the pulpit stood District Attorney Hugh Craig, facing the congregation. He was flanked by State Detectives Griffin and Murray. Next to each detective withstood a uniformed and armed state police trooper. The DA, an experienced campaigner and savvy public speaker, began, "You are all members of this community. We need the help of all of you in locating the murderer now at large. There have been 2 brutal murders by a fiend." The DA mentioned a couple clues to the members. He said that the investigators didn't believe robbery was the motive. He mentioned the similars of Ada's case to the Oker murder last year. Everybody stared at the DA, expressionless. Nobody spoke or stirred. Craig continued, "I want every one of you to turn detective, not only to bring this murderer to justice, but to protect your own lives. I want you to think back upon anything unusual that might have happened, that you might have forgotten. Think back carefully. You gave a surprise Halloween party for your pastor, Reverend Albert Johansson. You were there. She went home from there to be brutally killed. I want you to think back. There have been 2 members of your congregation brutally murdered in the past year and a half. Perhaps the slayer of Mrs. Johnson and Arthur Oker is among you here. As far as you or I know, he may be here right now. Every one of you is under suspicion. I want to warn you that there is a killer in your midst, and you, and you, and you might be the next victim." With each "you," the DA pointed to a different person in the pew. "I am asking every one of you to be vigilant and to cooperate with the authorities to bring about the apprehension of this fiend. Help me on this. That's all then. Keep thinking, or you may be next." There was a stunned silence. An unnamed member of the congregation broke it by shouting that everyone assembled should be fingerprinted. The DA replied that that wouldn't be necessary at this time. A congregant made a motion for the assembled to give all assistance to the investigation. The motion passed. Boston Globe journalist Jeffrey Parsons Jr. wrote, "As he spoke these words, there was a tenseness in the air that was entirely foreign to this place of worship." Boston American journalist James J. Smith described the event as eerie and speculated that the Midnight Mass was a psychological stress test to check the reactions of the 60 congregants. The DA dismissed the SCC. The congregation broke into little groups and headed home under the moonlight along the dark shore. So I know that sounds like fiction or cozy crime, but it's not. It's an actual crime. It happened about 90 years ago in a little town, Rockport, just up 128 from where we are now. So tonight, you want to go ahead?
Before the slideshow.
Sure.
These events happened 91, 92 years ago, which means that the perpetrators are either dead, on Social Security, or both. We have a wonderful researcher. Rob found this out. The chief of police of Rockport at the time was John E. Sullivan. John E. Sullivan, in his youth, had been an actual on-hands, in-the-street patrolman, and had been, as a police chief, a very active person. He had lost a thumb. His left thumb was missing because you put it in the book. A wild Finn had bit it off. Actually, you said wild.
It's insane.
A wild Lanesville Finn. And I was born and brought up in Lanesville, and I thought it wasn't. I think it was a wild Rockport Finn. Pigeon cobra. No, that's a pigeon cobra. In fact, one of the things you haven't mentioned yet, but I'd like to, is that the police, the state police moved 30 state troopers, moved a whole barrack into Rockport to search the place, every place, and join the local police force. And then, of course, you heard about the district attorney. There were others in town for this purpose. And they searched every house, every building, every barn, every shed, every structure in the town of Rockport. Altogether, almost 3,000 structures, or all the houses, which meant that if anybody today in Rockport owns a house that goes back to the 1930s, they own something that was belonged to murder suspects. That's right. The amazing thing to us, and you put it in the book too, Rob, is that there were no search warrants. This was accomplished with volunteers. You'd knock on the door and say, I'd like to go through the house. And you went through the house. That meant even the drawers and the closets and everything.
What were they looking for?
What were they looking for? They were looking for a murder weapon. They were looking for a murder weapon. The two victims both were bludgeoned to death.
Yeah.
And that is an issue. Also, because of the nature of things, if you do a change of clothes, for instance, you leave your bloody clothes somewhere, if they found bloody clothes, that would be a clue that you might want to follow through. The other thing is, if anybody in town said, nay, don't come into my house. Whoa, there's a suspect for you. Nobody said no. And my aunt lived long enough. She was from that era. I remember talking with her when I was a kid about this, and she said that was when we started blocking the doors. That was when we started, or some people would buy dogs, watchdogs. So these things were happening. Otherwise, I know Rob has prepared for you a truly unique slide presentation, which includes materials not even in the book, beyond that. And so I'm pleased to introduce it to you and just let him go over that.
I do have a spoiler alert at the beginning, and I'm not going to tell you who the killer is. But
we're going to ask.
You can ask all you want. But we will tell you a story. And it's a true story. This is a real crime that happened. Arthur Oker was an honest businessman. He was an immigrant church president, a pillar in his community, and frankly, everybody loved Arthur Oker, except somebody didn't. Ada Johnson, she was a hard-working, church-going Swedish widow. She said she knew who killed Arthur and paid for it. Reverend Johansen was the new replacement pastor of the church. He wondered what secrets his congregants kept, but he had a few of his own. Chief Sullivan, he kept the peace for decades in this seaside town, calming the waters until he was out of his depth. And of course, District Attorney Hugh Craig, which, fun fact, grandfather of rock star Huey Lewis. He was the big city DA. He did everything he could to find justice. Desperate times, desperate measures. And of course, there's Patrolman Jimmy Quinn. This is Jimmy Quinn. He was the local cop that managed the station's art collection. He swore, I'll get to that in a second. He swore to catch the killer, and he kept on swearing.
Tell us how they came by such a wonderful art collection in the police department.
Well, actually, that is going to be another kind of follow-up historical research we're going to do, but perhaps many of you don't know, but the town of Rockport itself has an amazing art collection. It's like the Met of towns in Massachusetts. It literally, so like Jimmy Quinn, he was the curator of the art collection in Dock Square, where the combined police and fire department was. And we don't know how they got all these arts. Like, was it like, did you pull over like, what's his name, Edward Hopper, and like, sorry, officer, I had just a couple of drinks, but here's a nice landscape for you. I don't know, but But anyway, Jimmy manages the collection regardless. So all these folks and more are in this book called Murder in Rockport, Massachusetts, which Wayne and I wrote, just released about a month ago. And I wanted to talk a little bit about, there was an author, I think his name was L.P. Hartley, and he said that the past is a foreign country. And it really resonated with me while researching and writing this book, because, I mean, obviously, look, I grew up in Wenham, lived near Manchester my whole life, I live in Essex now, whatever, like, all the places that are in Rockport that are mentioned are places that are familiar to me, yet they were so different in researching what Rockport was like in the 1930s. Like, for example, I had no idea about this vibrant Nordic culture, both Swedish and Finnish, that was in Rockport. I had no idea about how rural and cut off Cape Ann was from not only the rest of Massachusetts, but the rest of the world. I mean, this is back, again, before 128, there was one bridge in, one bridge out, the Blenheim Bridge, and the bridge was up, and a boat was going by, forget it, that was it. And I also learned a lot about how awful, truly awful the Depression was. I think I grew up sort of hearing sepia tone stories about, oh yes, times were hard, but we played baseball on the block, and it was okay. And no, there was some really, really sad, horrible stories from that time. And in researching this book, we also learned a lot about violence against women, prevalent was, and generational trauma. Of course, we expected the kind of small town secrets and lies, that you're going to find in any kind of small town, including Manchester. But I found myself puzzled, and I still find myself puzzled, over aspects of this case, these two cases. And Wayne and I have gone back and forth in person and on emails, so we can make an assertion and say, oh, we think this way, and then we can look at the evidence and we have, can come up with a contradictory conclusion, which is why what makes these events so baffling. We didn't want to write an exploitative book. We didn't want to write kind of cozy crime. There's no kind of Colonel Mustard in the drawing room with the lobster hatchet or something like that. But we did want to give the reading public a comprehensive, fact-based account about these events that, I know everyone here is across the bridge, but in Rockport, this still resonates down in amongst the community. This is something that has not gone away, and we actually gave a presentation at the Rockport Public Library. Was it last week? Yeah, and it was wild. People were just coming up to us thank you for writing this. It was intense. But one of the issues that we had is that how do you write a true crime book when the evidence has been destroyed?
We developed a little skit in which we imagined something that never happened, is that somebody was actually indicted and they were on trial for their life, really, for having done either or both of these murders in about 1950. And I'm the dynamic defense attorney who was examining the police officer, a luckless fellow who has to testify, and I'm going to go through it now with you. This is a grand jury, don't forget. This is the grandest jury I've ever had. Tell the jury your name, please.
Joseph Ferrari, detective.
Mr. Ferrari, have you ever considered designing a sports car?
No.
You are a detective.
Yes.
And how long have you been a detective?
25 years.
And in these 25 years, have you solved crimes?
Yes.
In fact, are you the one who solved 10 murders in 10 years?
Yes.
Are you called one of the four aces?
Yes.
You are then the one I want to talk to and ask a question of. When you interview people with your expertise, 10 murders in 10 years, remember the four aces, do you make notes?
Yes.
Do you keep those notes?
Yes.
Do you secure those notes?
Yes.
Did you interview people in this murder trial, in this murder case?
Yes.
Where did you put the notes?
They were in a police station.
The Rockport Police Station.
Yes.
Did I send you a subpoena to be here today?
Yes.
Did you read the subpoena?
Yes.
Did you see on the subpoena, I asked you to bring documents with you?
Yes.
Did you inquire of the notebooks of interviews of witnesses that were in the police station?
Yes.
Are you always so talkative?
Yes.
When you inquired of these records, these notebooks of interviews with witnesses, did anybody tell you, here's the records?
No.
What did they tell you?
They threw him out.
They threw them out. Will you tell me, when you made further inquiry, whether there was an instruction or an order to destroy the records? Was there?
Yes.
And did this person who ordered the destruction of the records that you made of interviews with witnesses have a name?
Chief Sullivan.
Chief Sullivan. I rest my case. Now you can see where this is building up to. In the book, as described, the chief of police in, was it 1944?
Yeah.
Rob, you tell the full story. He's no longer the detective. He's actually...
Detective Ferrari is an actual, he was one of the super sleuths of this Mass State Police. He was like an LAS for Mass State Police in the 1930s. A really super interesting guy. One of the first Italians to be like, basically the state police back then was all Irish, and like he was like one of the first Italians. Really amazing detective. And he probably would have been like that loquacious. Anyway, so sometime during the 1943-44 period, the Rockport police chief, John Sullivan, on the eve of his forced retirement at age 84, cleaned out the Rockport police station. So he tossed into a local quarry case evidence from multiple violent crimes and incidents in Rockport during his 40-year tenure as chief. And the evidence included all the paperwork and photographs of the Oker murder. No, not the newsreel. That's from the state police. So so we know this. There's a book titled Rockport Remembered, which is a collection of anecdotes compiled by a guy named Roger Martin. Has anybody here ever heard of Roger Martin? Yeah. So Roger Martin is this. He was the poet laureate of Rockport. He was the founder of Montserrat College of Art. Apparently, a very good, a wonderful artist in his own right. He was also the grandson of the murder victim Arthur Oker. And anyway, so in the book, he has a quote from a guy named H. Lawrence Jawdry, which specifically mentions how Sullivan thought at first of donating the material to the Historical Society, but then he said, why expose people to all those bad memories? Now
By the way, that was Judge Jawdry.
Yes.
Was the chief judge of...
Yes, he was. That was what's extraordinary is that it is Judge Jawdry who died in 2004, and he was the former presiding justice of the District Court of Eastern Essex.
So you can take his word to the bank.
And I think what's also extraordinary about this is that, remember, the murders occurred in 1932 and 1933. Sullivan tossed them out in 1943, 10 years later. And, that's...
Open murder case.
Open murder case. This is
So
obviously...
we have discovered a felon, and he is the police chief of Rockport.
Yes. So, but that still does not help our conundrum is that, well, apparently they tossed everything out. So how do you write a true crime book when everything's been tossed out? Well, one fortunate thing that we had is that the two cases were kind of the Karen Reed cases of their day. So there were over, we researched over 230 newspaper articles from 19 different publications. Everything from national newspapers, like the Boston Globe and the New York Times, all the way down to more regional papers like the Lynn Daily Item, and of course the Gloucester Daily Times as well, which provided a great local perspective on what was going on. So imagine like a jigsaw puzzle where like each newspaper's got like they got a couple of pieces, and so you can, by just doing all this research, you can start to assemble the picture, the whole of it. I want to give special recognition to the GET. They did a very good job covering the case. They were often very much at odds with what other people were writing. You clearly get this sense that there was a lot of people upset at what they called the metropolitan dailies coming into Cape Ann and poking around into their business and big city slicker journalists, that kind of stuff. And I also want to give a special shout out to a guy named William Brothers of the Boston Daily Record. And there's also Edwin Inglis of the Boston Post. And of course, none of you have ever heard of these people, but they deserve to be recognized because they were amazing investigative journalists of the time, and they deserve to be recognized for their efforts, to find the truth of these horrible crimes. Okay, what else do we have to look at? Well, there's always wonderful to go visit historical societies, like the Manchester by the Sea Museum, or a local library. And so we did a lot of work in like the town annual reports. We looked at material. That's a picture of one of the death certificates there. Thank you to the town clerk. And this was really great for us to sort of get a sense of what was happening in the community at the time. Very, very useful. And actually, I think Ancestry.com was actually quite good. Specifically for things like the directories, the city directories published in the early 1930s. It was really, really helpful to sort of figure out like, oh wait a minute, who's living with who? And who's married to who or related to who? And like, what's their address? And like, so we were starting to sort of, kind of piece things together about this community back then. And we did some internet sleuthing, and we found a treasure trove. So, there's a university in Chicago called North Park University, and it has a library called the Rendell Library. And in the library, it has the F.M. Johnson Archives and Special Collections. And the F.M. Johnson Archives and Special Collections includes a Covenant Archives and Historical Library, which contains church records from various Swedish congregational churches in North America, including a certain Swedish congregational church in Rockport. So we're like, ooh, gotta get me some of that. So we made inquiries with a guy named Andy Meyer, who's the director of the archives, wonderful guy, and kudos to him. He provided us with a zipped file of 23 PDF documents from the Swedish Congregational Church in Rockport. This was everything from correspondence, pastoral reports, mortgage statements and the like from 1895 to 1948. So like big scoop, we were super excited. But as you'll notice, it's written in Swedish. And Wayne and I don't speak Swedish. But we are undaunted, and Wayne has found a wonderful woman named Eva Korpi, who is a Cape Ann resident and a native Swedish speaking person. So she was able to translate for us these records. Huge shout out to her. Her assistance was invaluable to our project. And she was very good at reading Swedish cursive, which just looks really difficult. But anyway. Okay, one of the things I mentioned, Roger Martin, grandson of one of the victims, founder of Montserrat College of Art. We are not the first person to try to get to the bottom of this case. Roger Martin actually spent a bit in the 1990s trying to do some research. And he reached out to the Mass State Police and asked to see the Oker file of his grandfather, and they said, we found the file, and we found it empty. And yeah, that didn't sound good. So like we said, well, why not? Like, we're gonna try again. So we did, and in August 2023, so we did an open records request with the Massachusetts State Police. I don't know if any of you have just like on your spare time ever done something like this, but like, you gotta do it. There's a whole portal for it on like mass.gov, and you have to like apply and give all these reasons of why you want this information. It's kind of serious, and like justify like why you should see these records, all that kind of stuff. So we did. We went through this whole arduous application process. We hit submit, and we waited, we waited some more, and then, out of the blue, we received a 21-page PDF statement of scanned microfiche. It was the Mass State Police case correspondence from the Oker investigation from 1932 to 1945, including witness statements, the autopsy report, and follow-up reports from the various detectives over time. The documentation, which we were able to corroborate with additional research that we had done, led us to identify an additional person of interest, we'll say. And I do want to point out that they think that the Mass State Police could not find any files on the Johnson case, which is amazing. So like one of the things I think we'll want to explain, Wayne talked about how the state police went to every single structure and interviewed 3,000 plus adults in Rockport. You know, where were you on the night of Halloween? We know that generated literally bankers' boxes and bankers' boxes of interviews. We know that there was a ton of documentation. We know that they actually bought a movie camera to film, like a newsreel, to film the state police troopers and the investigators going through Rockport. We just don't know where they are. So it is possible that they're all tossed. It's also possible that they're buried in some back closet in an abandoned building in Fort Devens and just waiting to be found. Yeah. Yes, they're right next to the Rembrandt. This is good. Yeah. One of the things that was great about researching this is the interpersonal dynamics. Everybody in Rockport says they know who did it. It doesn't mean that they're all thinking of the same person. Sometimes, like basically it also doesn't mean that the person that many of them are thinking about is necessarily the murderer. There was a lot of gossip, there was a lot of innuendo, and just shade being thrown about after these crimes. And I love this photo because this is the Oker family, so that's author Oker with his daughter Ellie, who was Roger Martin's mother, his uncles and stuff. And like, just love the sort of juxtaposition of like this perfect family and the sort of horrible stuff that happened to them, and also just sort of the undercurrents in Rockport. It's like, oh, in Rockport, we're one big happy community, and like, there's just like stuff underneath. There's like, seven deadly sins in the weather, I guess. One reason for writing this book is that, I mentioned it's not like cozy crime, but it does actually have this kind of standard locked room mysteries like Sherlock Holmes would talk about. And so this is just a graph that's basically showing Arthur Oker. He's a tailor, he's a church president, everybody loves him. He's there at Saturday morning, May 21st, 1932, in his shop, busiest shopping day of the week, because people are coming in, they're buying socks, they're getting alterations, they're doing whatever. So all these people come in. This is a timeline from 8 a.m. until 11:45 p.m. or whatever, or 11:45 a.m. And a bunch of people come in, and they think they see somebody. Could have been a straw-hatted man, it could have been a sailor, and then all of a sudden, at about 11:30, the door is locked and the shades are drawn, and he's found at I don't know, whatever it is, 12:45, beaten almost to death, dying, basically. So it's this weird locked room mystery. And one of the things I also love about this is that has anyone here ever heard of the book by Dan Simon, The Invisible Gorilla? It ties into this concept of again, going back to Sherlock Holmes, you see, but you do not observe. And that's what's so fascinating about this case is that so many people saw, but they didn't observe what was actually there. So, who was the Rockport maniac? Was this someone that was disorganized and spontaneous, crazy, or was it someone that was actually cunning, premeditated, and a mastermind? Well, we're not going to tell you who the killer is, but perhaps you can figure it out on your own. And now we'll take questions.
Hey, Rob, are you going to tell the story of the silver salesman, or do people have to buy the book to hear that?
Okay. So, one thing that's good about our book is that There's lots of really kind of crazy side anecdotes and stories in it. We have cross-dressing policemen, and we have not Jimmy Quinn. He wasn't he just collected art. He wasn't a cross-dresser. But the silver salesman. Okay, so just a quick anecdote. Just after the Oker murder, there was the police basically pulled over a car, and the two gentlemen in it, and the police said, "Is this your car?" And they said, "No."
Down the South Shore.
Yeah, so this is down on the South Shore.
Rent them.
Yeah, and then rent them, and they're silver salesmen from Providence. And
During the Depression.
this is during the Depression, yes. And they said, well, okay, this isn't your car. Where'd you get the car? They're like, oh, well, we borrowed it. And they're like, uh-huh. And they're like, no, seriously, we borrowed it from a guy in Essex. We told this guy in Essex that we were salesmen of a silver concern, and that we had some really important clients to see in Rockport and Gloucester and Manchester by the Sea, no doubt, and Essex. And so, can we take your car? And of course, apparently the guy said, okay, and lent him the car. And long story short, so their alibi actually did kind of check out. And Chief Sullivan said, well, you better go talk to the state police. And the two silver salesmen, for some reason, were not too eager to go talk to the Mass State Police, so then they got pinched again and got dragged into and interviewed by the detectives, but they were not the murderer. But that's just one sort of anecdote of many of how big the dragnet was and the kind of people that they were trying to capture.
You did solve one mystery. It was the mystery of the missing cornflakes, right?
Sure. So,
Tell us about that.
okay. So another little anecdote from the book, and there's lots of anecdotes in the book, so you should go buy the book because Hannah's got it right. Got a bunch of copies right over there. Okay. So you guys, you probably all heard of cornflakes, right? Well, you ever heard of Post Toasties? Well, Post Toasties was a big cereal company back in the 1930s. And in the 1930s, as you know, detective stories and detectives and all that kind of stuff were very, very popular. And anyway, so if you were a kid back then, you could go and if you sent in 3 or 4 box tops to Battle Creek, Michigan, you would get an Inspector Post badge. And you'd get a little booklet, and it could teach you how to sleuth and solve crimes. So anyway, so the Oker and Johnson cases happened between May 1932 and November 1933. The stuff goes down, and the kids start sending in the box tops. So when the state police are going through and knocking on every single door in Rockport, they are followed by a bevy of 12 6-year-old kids. I'm not kidding. This is documented with their badges, their Sherlock Holmes hats, and their microscopes. And it apparently actually really bothered the state cops. I wonder why. But this is a fact. So the weird thing is that basically, they ran out of cornflakes on Cape Ann that you couldn't buy breakfast cereal.
Questions out there, please.
Have you sold the film rights yet?
No, are you a producer?
Please.
Could you tell us a little bit more about the relationship between the two people who were murdered?
Yes, really good question. Sorry, and I know that over the bridge, everybody in Rockport knows all about this story, but we would need to provide context. Okay, so Arthur Oker was an immigrant. He was a church president of the Swedish Congregational Church, which is a tiny church in Rockport. It had about 60 pledged members. Augusta Johnson was a fellow Swede immigrant. She had married a Swedish immigrant from Rockport who had done very well, but he had died literally the week after Oker was killed. She was not a pledged member of the church, but she was very close, and she started to attend a lot of church events after the death of her husband.
I think she paid the dues, but she didn't get the secret handshake.
Yeah, so she was definitely, this is a very, very small community. She knew who Arthur Oker was. I believe that when one of the previous pastors was interviewing, they stayed at the Johnson house. So she was very, very tight with the sort of Swedish Congregational Church, even though she was not a pledged member of the community.
What are the specifics of each of the murders? Were they both like at midnight in private homes, or?
Yeah, I'll give you the elevator pitch. Arthur Oker was killed, in his shop on a Saturday. Door was locked, shades were closed. His son found him with his skull crushed on the floor of the shop, bleeding to death, possibly attacked with either a hammer or a hatchet. But said, 15 months later, in a Halloween party, Augusta Johnson said something at the party. Traditionally, sort of the way it's remembered in Rockport is that I know who did it, and if that person doesn't turn themselves in, I'm going to go to the police. So that morning, people see smoke coming out of her bedroom, and they go in, and she's found killed in her bed, and her body in the bed set on fire. Her head was also crushed. So there was similarities between the two methods of killing, basically.
How old was she?
She was about 55.
And I promise I'm going to buy the book.
That's okay.
Any further questions? Yes.
Laura, go ahead.
Fingerprints. I don't know when fingerprints were first started,
Yep.
but you said G. Sullivan. I know there was a crazy fish on the loose in Waynesville that probably took his thumb, but like, was there a thumbprint left, or were there any fingerprints taken?
Excellent question, and there's several chapters about the controversy of fingerprints.
I promise
That's
I'm
both
going to
crimes
buy the book.
Yes, go ahead.
I also thought that the maniac, if he preserved Chief Sullivan's thumb, could have made a thumbprint on the scene of
That's
the
really
crime.
forward-thinking. You're
Yeah.
definitely, you're
Anyway.
sleuthing the 2000s right
Is
now.
it fair to assume that you did find the killer?
I would say that we have our suspicions as to who the perpetrator or perpetrators are.
You will too if you read the book, Rick.
Yes, go ahead.
What are the chances are that it was possibly a member of his family?
Oh, really good question, actually. So with regards to Oker, I had initially always wondered about Rudy, because typically when you have a murder, you search for the immediate family first. He had a rock solid alibi. He was with his mother. He was actually cutting wood in the backyard. There was no any kind of evidence of him being as a suspect, and he was cleared pretty much immediately. He seemed to get along fine with his dad. So Etta didn't have any other family locally. She had family in Boston and New Bedford, but she was a widower and lived alone.
How old was she?
55.
Did they only have one child? Oker.
Oker, no, they had, if we
Oh,
go
that's
back,
right, right.
they had, so they had 8 children, but only this is back in the day when you have 8, but only 4 survive. So they had I think four sons and a daughter.
So which of these is the son who discovered him in this photo?
This photo is actually from about 1915. So he's I think he's actually the one in the gray suit all the way over on the right.
Okay, but he was.
Yeah, this is 10 years before he actually.
So he was a grown man.
He was 19, and he was actually working as a chauffeur. I mean, one thing that's really interesting is the time is that not every 18-year-old person went to college back then.
Can you identify who's in this photo?
Well, it's Ellie and Arthur and Inga, and I don't know the other. It's the Oker family. Yes, go
So
ahead.
who are our prime suspects? Number one, the police officer, cross-dresser, actor, art collector.
The cross-dresser and the art collector are 2 different police officers. Just want to make that clear.
Who would you list as the prime suspects?
I will tell you. I will tell you that the DA.
Privately.
Yeah, yes. My co-author's don't give away the farm. We discuss.
No, realistically, this is worthwhile characterizing to you folks who may or may not be, we're going to buy the book or not. And you're welcome to either way because of what I'm saying. In the book, authentically, as many possible persons of interest who may or may not also be suspects, and you can identify them as you're reading that. And also if there's any what they call exculpatory evidence, evidence that would clear them or seem to be contradicting that they were guilty, is in the book in a fair-handed way. So that when you read it, they will pop up, everybody with the possibility of they were on the scene and they might be. And some are not necessarily named, because the famous man in the straw hat, this wasn't invented by Rob, it was an actual man in the straw hat who was identified by people not from Rockport, a stranger in town. What was he doing hanging around in the tailor shop for hours? And then the door's locked and the shades are dropped. And then a person across the street says, with questionable credibility, that they saw a person walk out of the shop wearing a straw hat and going down the street. Well, if you figure that out, where was the getaway car if you're going to do this? But anyway, forget it. The main thing is, in the book, is put your hand in the pocket. In America, you're innocent until proven guilty, and that's guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. We don't have any ability to tell you this. We have something beyond a reasonable doubt. But that don't sums it up.
Well, there's some people that we don't like. Yes, go ahead.
Did you meet with a lot of opposition? There must be family members that are still around North Shore.
Very, very good question. We had excellent relations with the family members of the victims, but there were other families that never wanted to talk to us.
Yeah, you don't want your great-grandfather or grandfather or whatever being a suspect.
They were very, very cordial people in all respects. And if they chose not to speak, they would say, basically, I prefer not to kind of get back into it on an issue that was so grievous and painful to them.
Yeah.
But others would be willing to speak as to what they knew or had heard. In some instances, it's, well, let's say it, I think it's in the book too. Arthur Oker, back in the old country in Finland, before he came over here, before he got married, was a bookie in family law. His engaged wife, or the woman who did marry him, said, I won't marry a bookie. I don't want you to do any gambling of any kind. He agreed, they married, came to America, and so far as anybody knows on record, documented, is he was a tailor, he was a trusted man receiving receipts for the coal company and the telephone bills and things. You know, you didn't send checks in those days, or so. Answer to your question is yeah.
Whenever I said I could come up with an opposite assertion, no, that's not true. Anyway, you were gonna have a question, go ahead. Yeah, you.
Yes, I just wondered if there was enough DNA evidence anywhere with the newest technology that could go back and solve the whole case.
We've been approached by people that are interested in pursuing that, but I mean, we don't have any evidence. Actually, so there is some evidence in the Rockport police station.
When we spoke in the Sawyer Library, a gentleman said he was an expert in this. He had done it for a living. He had just done DNA stuff. And he said if only we would give him a sliver of anything from the scene of the crime, he could identify the criminal. Wow. And we don't have anything surviving, as you heard so many things were thrown out and so forth. But it also was true when somebody said, are you sure? He said, I'm not going to do it, because he was worried. Who's in there? Who's going to, So it's still terrifying. It's still terrifying.
I do want to clarify, so there are 3 pieces of evidence remaining in the Rockport police station in the strong box. There is part of Ada's skull, a little bit of her hair, and her eyeglasses that were burned in the fire. And they have supposedly been in the strong box. We actually contacted the Rockport police and they did not respond to our request to see them. But they did respond to the surviving family members who have asked about the evidence, and they're interested in doing some DNA.
But nothing from the Oker. There's no evidence from the
evidence from the
Oker.
Oker family, no. Yes.
Is the tailor shop, the physical building, is it still in existence today?
Yep.
And where is it in March? modern day Rockport?
Was it 177 Main Street?
It's 77 Main Street,
So can you give like a
and it's
description
toward
of
the
what?
end near the beach.
Pardon?
So you'd be in front of Shaolin Lu,
If
go left, same side of the road.
Shailene Lu is right in front of you, and you walk left,
Yeah.
it's a few doors down to 77 Main Street.
Used to be the laundromat, but now it's an art gallery, but the guy that just owned it, the guy that owned it died recently, so there's nothing kind of there.
I think there's a new gallery going.
Probably.
Probably, yeah.
How did he die?
Good question.
Nobody knows.
Yes, go ahead.
You killed him.
Yeah. After the second murder, did anybody leave town?
Yes. Next question.
Was it normal to throw away evidence after 10 years back then?
It is illegal.
No.
It's illegal, an open murder case.
Yeah, it's
You
illegal.
can't, you'll be in jail for obstruction of
So
justice.
did anybody complain?
No.
Who knew? Who knew
Well,
at the time?
Lawrence Joggery knew, apparently,
After a while.
the judge.
So you just said that the gentleman was Finnish and the woman was Swedish, but they're in the same congregation.
Excellent question. Arthur Oker was actually an ethnic Swede born in Finland. So he straddled both communities.
In Finland, even to this day, about 95% of the people speak in their homes Finnish, and 5% in their homes speak Swedish. And he was one of those who, in his house, grew up speaking Swedish, as did his wife. So the people you saw there, in their house in Rockport, spoke Swedish. And in their church, they spoke Swedish.
How long did the suspect live in Rockport?
Which suspect?
Well, there's I think Roger Martin in his book said something like, he saw this gentleman in a town event in the 1980s. He didn't identify the person. He wouldn't even tell his family who that was or who he suspected.
I think the thing is that the town of Rockport was very much like, there's a killer that lives among us that got away with it. And like, we all know who that is, don't we? You know, like that kind of thing.
Well, again, beyond a reasonable doubt. Where's the witness? Where's the evidence?
Are you getting different questions today from Manchester by the Sea that you got in Rockport with the Manchester like, you know, there's a killer among us.
Now, you guys are asking really good questions. Those Rockport things in Swedes are kind of, you know, they're kind of quiet.
They just stop there like, we're not gonna be careful.
You mentioned that Oker was a bookie, and before he came to the United States, is that right?
So
Family legend is.
Okay.
I think that's ex post facto.
Okay.
There's no evidence to indicate that Arthur Oker was anything but like seriously like an upright Christian. There's
There
no
is that
evidence.
lottery ticket. No, we're not making it up.
No, there is a lottery ticket, that is true. And there is, so this is the thing, it's the early 1930s. This is an era before Social Security. Gambling and lottery was like, an underground lottery is the only way to make a windfall. So, was it conceivable that he could have been a bookie?
When did he come to the United States?
Given 1904.
Was it American lotto ticket or was it a Swedish one?
We wish that Chief Sullivan hadn't thrown it out.
Can I just, the vault, he had a vault, safe in his tailor shop. And his pockets had been taken out, no wallet, and the vault was open, and left inside the vault by persons unknown, was a little lottery ticket, which, when examined, was supposed to be a winning lottery ticket.
That was the rumor.
But it was,
They
yeah,
remember
but
that-
it
No, it was a winning ticket, but when they examined the person who won, they said they already got the money from,
Yes.
well, they didn't say.
Yes,
from Oker.
there's a whole chapter in the book about the lottery angle.
But it wasn't a
Forget it,
Swedish lottery
I
ticket,
said.
it was an American lottery ticket.
Well, it was a
We don't
black
know.
market
We don't
underground
know.
lottery ticket, but the most lottery
Yeah, but
tickets
it was
were,
written in, like, what
it was written in English.
it was written in English, so it's most likely
This is also 1930s growth of the syndicate, organized crime.
There's another avenue of rum runners, because this is on the beach. If you go to the back of the store, down underneath, there's a doorway that you can open to go onto the beach and the ocean, which is where the rum runners sometimes find stuff.
There's a little anecdote about the family's relationship to.
Don't even say that.
You mentioned a judge. Was the court involved at some point, and what court? The Gloucester District Court?
So we talk a little bit about how like murder cases were handled in the 1930s in Massachusetts. The case, no one was ever arrested. There was no grand jury. So the district attorney was involved in the investigation, but no one was arrested or brought to trial.
But you mentioned the judge. You mentioned the judge.
Judge Godfrey was just a bystander and had a conversation with the chief. But
Yes.
you did one other thing. This is the only person in life, I think, that has ever looked at the scrapbooks of the district attorney that he left behind. When he died, the family gave the scrapbooks, where was it put? University of Lawrence?
The Lawrence Historical Society.
Lawrence Historical Society. He went up there, Lawrence Historical Society, looked through the scrapbooks of, what's his name, Ucraig?
Ucraig.
Ucraig, who was the grandfather of...
He was Lewis.
And he looked through all the pages and all the scrapbooks and all the newspaper articles, and all the other cases are there, but not the Oker and the Johnson cases. So, what do you make of that? Whatever you want to make of that. Go ahead.
Defeat is an orphan.
Yeah.
Get it off me. Yes, go ahead.
Well, how long did it take you to research and write the book? And what was your,
2 years.
Just how like a general process of finding the information?
Just obsession. No, so like I'd been interested in this case. I had read, so about every 10 years I got a Boston Globe article would come out about it. But I read a blog post from a Gordon College student who was taking a journalism class, and her name was Courtney Scott Solero. And she had gone to San Diego Historical Society and taken all the files there and sort of wrote a framework of it. I inspired by her blog. I wrote another blog called Whatever You Say, Say Nothing, which was a deeper investigation into the case. And then Wayne found that, and he said, hey, do you want to go pitch History Press?
The book was half written. I only had to join him.
So then that's when we got, that's when we did the go to the Mass State Police files, go contact the Swedish files. And so then it was great because we had a framework, but then we spent a year debating kind of back and forth about what do we put in, what do we put out, what's how do we make sense of this, because it was baffling. Yes.
Two more questions. Well, you already asked.
Okay. There's someone else. Yeah, you go. There you go.
Speaking of making sense of it, Mrs. Johnson, the widow Johnson, it's 6 months after Oker's murder, she announces that if he doesn't confess, I'm going to turn it in.
It was about 17 months. So he died in May 1932, and this was on November 1933.
So she's taking a very long time waiting for him to confess.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. If you read the book, you'll read kind of a little bit more about the circumstances of how, what did she know, when did she know it, what did she say? Because it is a little,
One other thing you'd be interested in your question. Her husband died a week after Oker, and he on his deathbed said to somebody,
I know who did it.
so perhaps that's her source. But anyway, right there.
I just have a quick question about, you mentioned briefly about what you learned about the Depression and the horrors of it. Can you talk a little bit more about that and what that has in terms of relevance to the case?
Yeah, so
Desperate times, desperate people.
Okay, so let's say this. A bunch of Rockport children had diphtheria. They had to roll back the tax rolls to 1923 standards. All the teachers had to give 5% of their salary to pay for the poor rolls. People were given, the Red Cross gave out grapefruit, coal, and flour. People were forced, basically all the unemployed men, particularly the granite workers, were digging ditches and all that kind of stuff. How it affected in the case itself is that you just had a lot of desperate people either fleeing town or coming into town. And, they were kind of just vagrants picked up. So like that was, it was like, oh, is this vagrant, is this the straw-hatted man, that kind of thing. But it's just like, it was just the sort of desperation. I mean, things were really like there was a feeling of kind of gloom, and then this murders just like compounded that.
I know you're not taking any more questions, but this is about you guys. This is not about the book. Do you guys have roots to Rockport? And was your grandmother alive? Did she have a commentary? Did you talk about it? And do you have roots to Rockport?
I go first because I have more roots.
Yeah.
My grandfather was one of the interviewed people because he was merely one of the adults in town, and he was Finnish. And that was, they even looked for somebody might be in the sauna that did this, So, I'm not making this up. But, and my grandfather my father was born in Rockport, and so my aunt, who likewise was born in Rockport, but she's the one that talked with me about this case and told me that's when they started locking the doors. So the answer is yes, there's some rules.
We didn't lock our doors so much later.
Later.
But anyway, do you have...
So my great-great-great-grandfather pitched up in Rockport in about 1850. He was one of the first Irish quarry workers. He actually ended up slitting his throat in the bathroom of Folly Cove, which, for unknown reasons, which is prompted when I found out that story, which was totally, not told in my family. And then I read about this Augusta Johnson case. I'm like, what's up with Rockport? This is a really scary town. But anyway, so my family owned a granite quarry, the Ankeny Granite Quarry in Lanesville. And my great, I think she was a cousin once or twice removed, was Maggie Dwyer, who was the Pigeon Cove correspondent. Yes, you and I might be related. She was the Pigeon Cove correspondent from 1890 to 1935. I wish I could time travel back and ask her about this case.
Wow.
Thank you.
Thank you.